ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरेष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा मृतंगमय। ओम शांति शांति शांति। Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, who has come to re-establish religion on the right track, to remove all confusion about religion, all separatist tendencies about various religions. He has come to integrate all the religions. Every religion is as sacred as the other. There is no superior or inferior with regards to different religions. All religions lead to the same goal. The Divine Supreme is the Godhead. Whatever way we approach, we reach the same God. Sri Ramakrishna came to show this by his own practical way of practicing religion. He realized the truth in all the religions and then declared, as many faiths, so many paths. That is the meaning of Sthapakaya cha Dharmasya. He is the embodiment of all the religions, and he is the incarnation supreme at the present time. Each incarnation is supreme at that point of time. At the present context, Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings have universal appeal. May we offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna. May we pray to him to lead us from unreal to the real, from darkness of ignorance to light of knowledge, from death to immortality. Let us pray to him to remove all afflictions confronting us in our life. Let us pray for peace and happiness of the whole humanity. Let there be peace and peace, peace everywhere. Today's topic, the real battle fought within. Battle, yes. There will be battle always. The battle between good and evil. It is very important to note that we have come here to fight, not to yield. So we must be courageous and bold to face the life under all circumstances. What is the purpose of this battle? It is to gain the kingdom where there is everlasting peace and bliss. First we should sort out who are our enemies. Then only we can fight them properly. Then with determination we should carry on the fight till we achieve our goal. To defeat the enemies, to annihilate them, to eliminate them. The saints all over the world have pointed out in unmistakable terms that one's real enemies are within and not without. They are just hiding in our own heart. They are indeed very powerful, like a concentrated poison. Everyone can vouch for this stark reality if only he can turn his mind inward. The Upanishads say, turn yourself inside, turn thine eyes unto thyself. We are always projecting our eyes outward, always criticizing others, condemning others, as if we are all perfect on this world. But we have to turn inside. First condemn yourself, judge yourself, correct yourself. By doing so, you will be contributing for the betterment of the society in the world. He can see for himself how base passions like greed, envy, and hatred prod him to various sinful acts. One has to remain ever wary and wage a relentless battle to keep them in leash until they are totally eradicated. These destructive forces, if unchecked, will lead one to an abyss of sorrow and suffering. The Divine Lord provides out of His boundless mercy for the erring man several opportunities to reform himself, to correct himself. But the depraved persist in their wicked nature and thereby invite doom. Several high souls like Vidura and Bhishma, I don't know whether you have read Mahabharata. If not, please go through that famous epic, Mahabharata by C. Rajagopalachari. Is very brief, very interesting, nicely written. And there is another Mahabharata written by Kamala Subramaniam. Most fantastic, very nice style, beautiful, Once you start reading, you won't take rest till you finish it. Please go through these famous epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. You will have various types of people coming there, showing their nature, how we have to act upon under different circumstances. There are lots of things to learn studying them. In Mahabharata we find there were many very good persons of high caliber like Vidura and Bhishma. They advised Duryodhana to give the Pandavas their due share in the kingdom, but Duryodhana was very obstinate. He would not budge even an inch of land. He didn't want the prosperity of the Pandavas. One cannot find a more tragic example of greed and hatred making a person totally blind to the realities and to impending calamity. What was the outcome? He had to pay a very dear price for possessing excessive greed. He did not listen to his doting old father Dhritarashtra, his loving mother Gandhari, Bhishma and Acharya Drona. With arrogance added to avarice, he treated Sri Krishna, who had come on a peace mission, with contempt and even plotted to imprison him. All the words of advice from elders and also a warning of the impending wholesale destruction could not change his mind. He would not part with an inch of land. That was the climax of his greed. This human life is often compared to an ocean which is full of perils from sea monsters, esoterically representing man's enemies like anger, conceit, ego, greed and infatuation. The shore on which man stands is infested with wild beasts, poisonous insects and devilish dacoits. But he has to cross the vast expanse of water to reach the other side, as he cannot remain on the inhospitable shore for long. To free him from such a predicament and to enable him to reach the goal, 2 boats are kept ready. One of them is the old type of craft which needs to be rowed, while the other is a steam launcher. The choice of the ferry is that of each person. The first vessel is called in Sanskrit Desha Virati. The meaning is partial observance of dharma. While the other is called Sarva Virati, complete dedication to dharma. Some people want this material enjoyment as well as spiritual life. Some people prefer total spiritual life. That is what is meant. The captain and the crew of the launch are the pious preceptors and religious leaders who lovingly invite people to start it and be their fellow passengers. That is why often again we find the holy people coming on this earth just to lift us up somehow, to save us from total destruction. The life of man is likened to that in prison. It is also comparable to a lion and a rat that have been caged. The rat does not think of escape so long as it has something to eat. But the king of the forest, lion, is bent upon escape, and food doesn't distract it. Now the question before man is whether he wants to be a prisoner, falling a prey to enticing allurements, entanglements, enslaving his 5 senses like a rat, or he would like to free himself from the clutches of the unspiritualistic inclinations like the lion. The options are there. So man has to be ever on the guard against powerful internal enemies like arrogance, lust, anger, and jealousy. People possessed with these evil tendencies go to any length of committing crimes. They don't have any discrimination. They are totally blind to all kind of politeness and peaceful life. They can corrupt even men of merit and learning if they are not sufficiently watchful. If a person gives in to their influence, he is doomed, however high placed he may be. Hence, one is warned against these enemies from within and is advised to exercise constant vigil to ward off their powerful influence. In a sense, they are interrelated, and if a person succumbs to one of them, he is overpowered by the rest. For instance, one who is filled with pride and arrogance, thanks to his position and power, may entertain lecherous thoughts and go headlong to satisfy his illegitimate desire. In the end, he will ruin himself. There are many instances in our scriptures. There was a great king by name Nahusha, an emperor, who ruled the kingdom very well. He was respected very much. He got lots of merit because of his meritorious deeds, as a result of which he was installed as the king of the heavens. That is, he occupied the highest position of the Devatas, that is, he became the Indra of the gods. But after some time, he became heady with power and position. He was enamored of pleasures. He was seeking more and more pleasure, more and more enjoyment. He forgot all about the divine Lord. He forgot about meditation. He forgot about worshipping the divine Supreme. He was concerned only with the pleasure and pleasure alone. On one such occasion, he wanted to go to a certain place where he wanted to have a pleasurable night. He ordered the Saptarshis, the 7 rishis who are all realized souls, who spend all their time in meditation. He ordered them to carry his palanquin. See, those in the heavenly regions, they must all obey the king of the heavens according to law. So the rishis also had to obey. Very good. They all came and carried his palanquin. But this Nahusha was very impatient, for he wanted to reach that place as quickly as possible. So in his haste to reach a particular place, he ordered the bearers, Sarpa means, in Sanskrit, it has got double meaning. One meaning is move fast, move fast. Another meaning is serpent. By that time he had disqualified himself by his vicious thoughts, and these rishis put him some questions about the way of dharma, which Nahusha could not answer because his mind was totally occupied with pleasurable thoughts. So that was enough to dethrone him from his position. He became disqualified by his rude behavior to stay in heaven any longer. Agastya Maharshi, one of the Saptarshis, he told him, "Oh Nahusha, you have lost your merit. You cannot stay in this heaven even a moment. You fall down. You yourself have repeated many times, Sarpa, Sarpa. You become Sarpa. Sarpa means serpent. As a result, he dropped himself from heaven onto the earth and assumed the form of a most dreadful python." Of course, there is a story afterwards how he got released when Dharmaraja came and touched him. Anyway, the point here is, one may be in a very high position, but if he is not following the righteous way, he can fall down headlong. Unless one realizes the Divine Supreme, there is every possibility of our getting ourselves involved in worldly things and losing our balance. Another enemy which is occupying our mind, which everybody is aware of, is jealousy. It is described as the bellows of the mind. It is the outcome of a deep desire to enjoy material comforts and is the root of all evils. One who yields to jealousy will naturally magnify all trifles. Saints who were the victims of others' envy have been prevented through various ways from spreading their message, but they continue to serve God without getting upset. Thereby they show their way how to conquer this evil quality. There was a saint, a very devoted person. He took upon himself the task of obtaining sandalwood, grinding it into paste and applying it to the image in a temple where he was engaged in the service of the Divine Lord. He was doing it with so much devotion and steadfastness. The king of the place became envious of this person. So, what he did was, he made it impossible for this saint to secure even a piece of sandalwood. Undaunted, what the saint did, he substituted his elbow on the grinding stone and rubbed it until blood started oozing, and he fell unconscious. All the time he was thinking about the Lord only. The Divine Supreme revealed himself and restored the saint his arm. We have seen in Swami Vivekananda's life how some people, a leader of the progressive religious movement, became jealous of Swami Vivekananda's signal success at the Parliament of Religions held in Chicago. These people, belonging to his own country, tried their best to cry him down. But Swamiji, the personification of strength, he withstood all these vilifications. There is another instance when Swami Vivekananda was in Kshira Bhavani. One Mohammedan used to come to Swamiji. He was attracted by Swamiji's personality. That person was suffering from fever and severe headache one day. He couldn't control. He came to Swamiji as usual. Swami noticed that person was not keeping well and he was suffering acutely. Swamiji, whose heart was like Buddha, touched him on the head with his fingers. Immediately, the ailment of that man was removed. The Mohammedan became thereafter very much devoted to Swami Vivekananda, and again began to come to him more frequently than before. He became a staunch devotee of Swami Vivekananda. But then what happened? This Mohammedan's guru was a fakir, another person who was leading a spiritual life. When he heard all this, that fakir became highly jealous of Swami Vivekananda, so much so he used his diabolical powers of a black magic to weaken Swami Vivekananda. It is recorded in Swami Vivekananda's life. In Sri Ramakrishna's life, we have an instance. You know, there was a priest by name Haldar, a priest in Kali Ghat, worshipping Divine Mother Kali. He became jealous of Sri Ramakrishna. Why? Because Mathurnath, the richest man of the time, and also who was looking after the administration of the temple, he was very close to Sri Ramakrishna and he loved him very much. And he gave all attention to him. Whatever Sri Ramakrishna needed, he was ready to supply, though Sri Ramakrishna didn't want anything. This Haladar, the priest, tried his best to get Mathurnath to his side, but somehow he did not succeed. So this Haladar became terribly angry and began to abuse Sri Ramakrishna for his no fault in vulgar language. One day before dusk, Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in Madhur Babu's house. He was in a semi-conscious state. Slowly he was getting consciousness of the external world. He was thinking about the Divine Mother. Nobody was there at that time. Just at that moment, Haldar, who was very envious of Sri Ramakrishna, happened to come there, he found Sri Ramakrishna sitting all alone. He took this opportunity. He pushed him and shouted, "You tell me, what's the secret? How is it you have made Mathura Babu to obey you? How is it that you are keeping mum and feigning ignorance? How could you captivate him? Please tell me." But Sri Ramakrishna was silent. He was not speaking anything. His mind was on Divine Mother. He was not at all conscious of what this priest was shouting about. But he became more and more angry. He said, "Why are you not opening the mouth?" Though he repeated his mutterings again and again, Master remained silent, for he was in a separate mood. The priest became highly irritated. What he did? He kicked the Master with a great force. With abusive language, he said, "Be off, rascal. You are reluctant to disclose the thing." Then he went away. We have glaring episode in Srimad Ramayana also, very interesting, how this jealousy works havoc and ruins the destiny of persons. How the dreadful poison of jealousy brought about the gloomy atmosphere in Ayodhya, the birthplace of Sri Ramachandra, besides killing Dasharatha, the father of Sri Rama, and bringing sorrow to the people of Ayodhya as a whole. What was the occasion? Hectic preparations were going on for the installation of Sri Ramachandra as crown prince. The whole of Ayodhya was decorated with garlands, festoons, flags, etc. Roads were all washed up and kept clean. The learned Pandits were reciting Vedas. A joyful crowd jostled one another. People were transported with joy. Everywhere there was a cheerful atmosphere. People were all happy and in a festive mood. There was a hunchback by name Manthara. She was a maid servant in the palace. She was attending Kaikeyi, one of the queens of Dasharatha. This Manthara came to know the cause for jubilation of the people. Immediately she rushed, boiling with jealousy. She went to Kaikeyi and she said fiercely, "O Kaikeyi, O queen, what are you doing? Your destruction is at hand." She began to sow the seed of poison. Your destruction is at hand. King Dasharatha is about to proclaim Rama the crown prince of the kingdom. I am plunged in a bottomless pit of fear. I am overwhelmed with grief. I am as if consumed by fire on your account, and I have hastened here to seek you out. O Kaikeyi, your ill fortune has thrown me into an abyss of distress. Without doubt, your prosperity is my prosperity. Born in a royal house, you are the consort of a king. How is it that you are unaware of your royal prerogatives? Your husband speaks you fair, but he is crafty, his words are honeyed, but his conduct is devious. Your natural guilelessness prevents you perceiving his duplicity. While with you, he overwhelms you with caresses, but today he is manifesting his real concern for the welfare of Kausalya, another queen of Dasharatha. In his cunning, Dasharatha has sent Bharata away to his kinsfolk in order to use the occasion to place Rama on the throne without hindrance. Under the guise of a husband, Dasharatha is your enemy, and in your maternal tenderness, you have nourished a serpent in your bosom. See what language he is using. Maid servant. Like unto a four or a snake that one has ignored, has the king Dasharatha shown himself to you and your son this day. That perverse wretch who caresses you deceitfully by installing Rama on the throne has in effect destroyed you and yours who till today have been accustomed to happiness. O Kaikeyi, whose regard manifests incredulity, act speedily for your own advantage and save your son, yourself and me. Administering poison of ill feeling again and again, Manthara finally succeeded in completely spoiling the mind of a very good lady Kaikeyi, which led to horrible events that followed afterwards. If you read Ramayana, again Kamala Subramaniam has written wonderfully well. Please go through these epics. So that is how the jealousy works out the ruin of a person. In Mahabharata also we see how this jealousy caused havoc, resulting in the ruination of the whole Kaurava race, and millions of people were butchered just because Duryodhana was the embodiment of evil, full of jealousy. Once King Yudhishthira, Dharmaraja, he performed Rajasuya Yaga in his capital, Indraprastha, which was attended by many kings and princes. There the Kauravas also had come to witness the function. Duryodhana also was there. The yajna was celebrated with great pomp. This King Duryodhana was smitten with jealousy at the splendor of the new kingdom and the honor shown to his royal cousin. All the people were showing great respect to Dharmaraja. This Duryodhana was boiling with jealousy, seeing this. He resolved on that day to bring about the destruction of the Pandavas under the cunning advice of Shakuni, his uncle, who was sly as a fox and a gambler, very skillful with dice. What happened? It paved the way for terrible suffering, humiliation and revenge to the Pandavas. Then war became inevitable, resulting in a holocaust of people. In Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna warns that Kama, Krodha and Lobha should be abandoned, since they are the triple gate of hell leading to the ruin of the soul. Trividham narakasyedam dvarannasanamaatmanah. Trividham narakasyedam dvaram nasanamatmanah. Kama krodhas tatha lobha tasmade tatrayan tyajet. Kama, Krodha, Lobha. Desire, passion, anger and greed. These are the arch enemies. Every evil thrives where Kama, Krodha and Lobha are grouped together. They easily bring about harm and readily cause pain. No one can find real happiness. No one can be peaceful as long as these three vices are active in his heart. Swimming across the ocean with a stone tied to one's body, or living on meal of the most dreadful poison, would not be more impossible than attaining one's goal in company with anger, passion and greed. Therefore, we should wipe out every trace of them. In another place, Lord Krishna again tells, Kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samudbhavaha mahasano mahapapma vidyenimiha vairinam. This craving, this anger, they are born of rajas. Know that this is our enemy here, all devouring and the cause of all sins. If you want to get rid of sins, you must get rid of this anger and passion, excessive passion. These Kama and Krodha are both devoid of compassion, and they are regarded as the equal of death itself. So they are considered the enemies of life. They have devastated the place of discrimination. This passion has been stripped bare and the neck of tranquility twisted. They have destroyed the forest of contentment, demolished the fortress of courage, and rooted up the plant of joy. They can drown without water, burn without fire, and silently they hold fast all creatures. They kill without weapons, bind without ropes, and strike down a wise man for a wager. They bury a man without earth, ensnare without a noose, and are unequaled in strength. Such is the dreadful state of a person possessed by anger and excessive passion. The force that impels you to do wrong. What is that force? It is desire. It is anger. They are not different, not two, but one and the same. Desire, when it is thwarted, when it finds an obstruction to its fulfillment, becomes anger. You give a piece of bone to a dog. I have referred this instance in my previous class also. It gnaws at it avariciously. Try to snatch it off. The dog becomes vicious. It bares its teeth to bite you. This is krodha, anger, which is an expression of desire when it is obstructed. Desire itself changes into anger. Anger is not born independently. Desire, and hence also anger, is born out of rajas. The whole creation is playing its game because of these three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. The interaction, the imbalance between these three gunas is responsible for the whole game of the world. So this Rajoguna, who is under this influence, thinks, I am the body, I am the mind, I am the intellect. This world is very real. To get joy, I have to work in the world, move among the objects of that world. He is conscious of this joy alone. He is just enamored of that. And he just dies in that. In that understanding, we go on working, thinking that we will get so much of joy out of our actions. So, Rajoguna is the force that makes us extrovert and induces to too much of physical actions. Our desire is born out of our extrovert tendency. Desire is such an avaricious eater that the more and more you feed it, that is fulfill your desire, it will ask for more and more. Nobody can satisfy the desire. Desire is such that it will never be satisfied however much you give way to it. Trying to satisfy yourself by accomplishing your desires is not the correct process, for you will never succeed in it. If one desire is satisfied, in its place 1,000 more other desires sprout up. People is even greater than the ordinary king. Of course, this incident also I had referred in my previous classes. And in this context, it is quite relevant to refer to this incident. That is about Akbar. Sri Ramakrishna also has referred to this incident. When Akbar was the emperor of Delhi, there lived a Muslim fakir in a hut in a nearby forest. Lots of people visited this holy man. Once the fakir desired to entertain his visitors, for which he needed money. The holy man didn't have money. So he thought if he could go to Akbar's palace, he might get the required amount. So he came to Akbar's palace. At that time, the emperor was praying before God. What was he praying? Oh Allah. Allah is the name of God. I have so many kingdoms, but I have not yet annexed Bengal. Give me soldiers, courage and strength, power and valor to conquer Bengal. After Bengal, I want to conquer Orissa. Like that he is asking before God. This murmuring was heard by the fakir, who was alarmed. He left the palace without asking anything from the emperor. Next day, Akbar himself went to the hermit with some offerings and said, "O holy man, please accept these things I have brought for you. And then please come to my palace. I will give you every possible comfort that you can think of." But to the great surprise of Akbar, the saint refused either to take the offerings or to go to his palace. Akbar was annoyed. He asked for the reason, why you are not coming? The saint answered, he did not want anything from a beggar. Akbar shouted, what? You call me the great emperor of Hindustan, a beggar? Unruffled, in a calm way, the saint said, yes, last night I heard you begging this and that of God. On the other hand, I am perfectly satisfied and contented. I don't want anything. How can I, who need nothing to make me happy, take anything from a beggar who has not enough to make himself happy? This opened the eyes of Akbar, who realized what an abject slave of desire he was. Like the emperor, we are also making our religion an institution for private begging from God. At least the ordinary beggars are honest and beg openly. We are dignified beggars. In order to make God respond, we flatter him, offer him this and that, give him money if he fulfills our desires, without knowing that the greatest puja we can do to God is to live a perfect life, ethically and morally, according to the dharma. The enemy, therefore, that stands between us and perfection is, many times I have told, kama, that is desire, which expresses through the body, mind and intellect. With the kama predominantly strong, whatever we do will not be perfectly done. Religion requires controlling this desire, to put a check on this. As long as desire controls us, we have no religion. What we have will at best be only a pretense of religion. Therefore, fighting this desire lodged in our mind is very imperative to achieve freedom and joy in the real sense of the term. If you want to have the experience of everlasting peace, mercilessly you must kick out the demon of desire occupying your mind. Nasti kama samo vyadhi, nasti moha samo ripuhu, nasti krodha samo vanhi, nasti jnanat param sukham. There is no disease that equals desire. Desire itself is a disease. There is no enemy that equals delusion. There is no fire that equals anger. There is no happiness greater than jnana, wisdom. In Srimad Ramayana, again, I am referring, we see Ravana, though he was most powerful and ruthless, he even conquered the devatas, that gods. Whenever Ravana would go, they would all tremble in fear. He had all the luxuries and wealth to enjoy. Yet, he had one most dreadful weakness, which paved the way not only for his ruination, but the entire race. And that was passion. He was excessively passionate. Seeing Janaki, the personification of beauty, the consort of Sri Ramachandra, who was shining like gold, Ravana cast his lustful eyes on her. This Ravana had many wives. He had many beautiful ladies in his harem. Yet he wanted Janaki also. That is, he is not able to satisfy his passion. He became crazy. So much so, he forcefully abducted Janaki. This disease of desire, passion in Ravana turned fatal. Though he was very powerful, though he could enjoy the whole life, yet enjoyment was not there for him because of his own folly. He, along with his race, was wiped out by Sri Rama's most powerful and poisonous missiles. So, passion is the dreadful enemy of the person. Next is delusion. He is also most dangerous and unparalleled enemy of man. Moha, what we call in Sanskrit, it is the root of all sorrow. Again, to take the example of an episode in Mahabharata, we have seen how Duryodhana, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, was cruel, malicious, deceitful, and utterly selfish. But Dhritarashtra, the father of Duryodhana, overpowered by vicious moha, could not mend the character of Duryodhana. Even this most wicked son Duryodhana was most beloved of his father Dhritarashtra. Many a time Duryodhana, with a connivance of his father, he plotted to kill the Pandavas. He trapped the Pandava brothers and their mother Kunti in a house built of lac and other inflammable materials. His idea was that all of them should be burnt by burning the building. He invited Dharmaraja to a game of dice and played a mischief. Dharmaraja lost all his belongings, including his brothers and wife, staking them in the game. Dhritarashtra was a silent spectator of all these events. He didn't stop them. Many, many unpleasant and unfortunate things followed, paving the way for final showdown. A bitter war killed all the Kaurava brothers, killed millions of people, and the great warriors, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, all of them were killed. But Dhritarashtra silently was hearing all about the war, hoping each time that his son Duryodhana would win the battle. That is Moha. All this ruination was caused by Dhritarashtra's incorrigible delusion of attachment towards his eldest son Duryodhana. Though he was a personification of evil, one day Sri Ramakrishna said to the devotees how delusion was very powerful, which could make the impossible possible. Once Narada Maharshi, a saint, he requested the Divine Lord to show him his all-deluding Maya. Narada was noted for his devotion, and he was always joyful because he was always feeling the presence of God. So he could not understand what is this people are talking about, Maya, etc. What is the delusion? What is this? I don't understand. So he just wanted to have the fun of it. He went directly to the Lord and asked him, please give me some experience to understand what is exactly the delusion, how people are falling prey to that. Then the Lord asked him to wait for some time. After some days, the Divine Lord just called this Narada Maharshi to come along with him. Narada didn't know what for the God is calling him. Anyway, he went. He was happy to go along with the Supreme Lord. After walking through some distance, the Divine Lord felt thirsty and tired. Walking miles and miles, he felt that way. So he rested for a while and asked Narada, "Oh Narada, please fetch me some water. I am feeling great thirsty. Bring some water somewhere, wherever you find, you bring it." So Narada immediately ran out in search of the water. After walking a considerable distance, he saw a river at a great distance. When at last he came near the water, he was very happy, he could see the water. At the same time, he saw there a most charming young lady sitting there all alone. Narada, who had not seen this sight before in his lifetime, was at once captivated by the way in which she is sitting, by the way in which she is making her gestures. He was very much impressed by her remarkable youthfulness and beauty. As soon as he went near her, she began to talk to him in very sweet words. This made him all the more attracted. Immediately, as usual, both fell in love with each other. Narada, the great Rishi, who was having the experience of the presence of God all the time, now he married this lady and settled down as an householder. In course of time, he had a number of children by her. And while he was thus living happily with his wife and children, it so happened one day a deadly epidemic disease broke out in the country, in the village where he was staying. Scores of people passed away. Then Narada proposed to abandon the place and go away somewhere else to a safer place. His wife agreed to it, and they left the house with their children and came near a bridge. When they were about to cross the river, there was a flash flood. In the rush of water, all the children were swept away, one after another. At last, the wife too was washed away by the flood. Overwhelmed with unbearable grief at the sudden turn of events, bringing total misfortune, Narada sat down on the bank and began to weep piteously. Just weeping, he couldn't control. Just at that moment, the Divine Lord appeared before him and asked, "My dear Narada, where is the water? What is this? Why are you weeping?" The sage was startled at seeing his beloved Lord, and then he understood everything. Oh, this whole game has been made by the Lord. He exclaimed, "Oh Lord, my salutations to you, and my salutations to your fantastic power of delusion." That is how delusion works. The next enemy is Krodha, anger. It is devastating fire. A terrible fit of anger shatters the physical nervous system and produces a deep and lasting impression on the subtle body. Dark arrows will shoot forth from the subtle body. A terrible fit of anger will produce deep inflammation of the subtle body, what we call in Sanskrit Sukshma Sharir. The effect of the fit of anger in the mind may subside in a short time, but the unpleasant vibration or wave continues to exist for days or weeks together in the subtle body. A man of anger does not hesitate to commit any abominable crime. So, there was one instance happened, how this anger forced the people to commit most heinous crime. Two brothers began to quarrel. This incident was reported in the newspaper which I read. One brother, in a fit of anger, stabbed the other in the kitchen 3 times. His anger was not abated. It was still blazing in all fury. What he did, he cut out his brother's heart and munched it. See the fun. There are many who are worse than demons, though cloaked in human form. Brutal killings are perpetrated through obnoxious temperament. Vigilant introspection, proper discrimination are to be cultivated to fight with dreadful enemies such as passion, anger, etc., torturing us inside our heart. When the wisdom dawns, man enjoys supreme happiness. Sri Ramakrishna once said to Narendra and his friends, "When you plunge in the water of the ocean, you may be attacked by crocodiles, but they won't touch you if your body is smeared with turmeric. There are no doubt 6 crocodiles, passion, anger, greed, etc., are within you in the heart's fathomless depths. But protect yourself with the turmeric of discrimination and renunciation, and they won't touch you." How beautiful teaching. Somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna how the enemies of man such as passion, anger, etc. would be vanquished. Sri Ramakrishna replied, "So long as these passions are directed towards the world and its objects, they behave like enemies. But when they are directed towards God Himself, they become the best friends of man, for then they lead him unto God. The desire for the things of the world must be changed into the hankering for God. The anger that man feels in relation to his fellow men should be turned towards God for not revealing himself to him. One should deal with all the passions in the same manner. These passions cannot be eradicated, but can be educated. Very important. Spiritual life is fighting these cruel and disastrous enemies and establish victory over them. It is effectively carried out under the guidance of holy men and leading a disciplined life. Let us remember Lord Krishna's message, and then I shall conclude this topic. Kshudram hridaya daurbalyam tyaktvottishta parantapa. Let us cast off the mean faint-heartedness and arise. That is the only way to fight the real battle within. Then we will be victorious and we will enjoy supreme peace and bliss. Thank you all.